Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another round of property pro tips straight from the pros. Today we have a special guest star, Sasha Struthers. She is a landlord advocate attorney, and she has one of the most interesting approaches to landlording and landlord laws here in California that I have ever seen. I'm very pleased to have her upon my show and spreading her knowledge with us. Welcome, Sasha. If you don't mind, I would like to read your bio so that you are formally introduced.
Sure.
All right. Miss Sasha Alex Struthers is a dedicated Los Angeles attorney specializing in cash for keys and real estate code enforcement. Starting her career in employer defense litigation, Sasha represented employers in various discrimination cases before transitioning to real estate law. She managed a 15-building portfolio, gaining first-hand experience in landlord-tenant relations and legal compliance, which now underpins her practice. Sasha's approach combines deep legal expertise with a commitment to understanding both sides of every issue, striving to advocate and resolve conflicts through understanding and negotiation. As a native Angelino, one who actually grew up here in Los Angeles, there's not very few of those folks, her work extends beyond the courtroom in educating the community about landlord-tenant law, aiming to protect and inform residents and business people alike. Welcome, Sasha, to our show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell us just what's the 10-second elevator speech for your company, Sasha, so those listening
Yes.
couldn't understand my babble.
No worries. My name is Sasha Struthers. I'm a Los Angeles-based attorney, and my law practice focuses predominantly on cash for keys and government compliance. So I deal with REAP cases, CRD cases, and orders to comply.
Got it. And for those who don't know what REAP, cash for keys, or
Yeah.
orders to comply are, just in case.
REAP, it's the Rental Escrow Account Program. And it's a program that LA City has for their code enforcement when they inspect apartments, rent controlled and not rent controlled. I just did a presentation on this last week with Agla and another attorney, Andy Baker. But REAP is after so long with an order to comply, either through a systematic inspection every couple of years or through a complaint. If there's outstanding repairs that haven't been completed, after so long, they'll send you to what's called the general manager hearing. And at that hearing, they might put you into the REAP program. In the REAP program, the tenants are given the option to either pay the escrow account, which the city is administering, or you directly, and then your rent gets cut 10 to 50%. So basically, the city has the option, and the tenants have the option to take away your liquidity, your rent, and still mandate that you repair stuff. And it's not just the stuff on the order to comply. They then do an entire reinspection of your property. They can add more stuff for you to comply with. And then they also include the building department, the fire department, and the public health department, and LAWP. So you have to be in good standing with all of those, have all cases closed out, be current on all your bills with LAWP, before you could even entertain getting out of the program. And so it's just not a situation that you want to be in with if you're a landlord. If you get a notice of a general manager hearing, you most definitely don't want to go to that hearing by yourself, because it's completely landlord adversarial hearing. But it's the single best opportunity for you to get a further extension to prevent yourself from going into that. So I always encourage landlords to hire an attorney that is very knowledgeable about the REAP program to represent you in that, because that hearing is like one of the most vital parts of the entire process, and your best shot at avoiding getting into the program altogether.
And just so our listeners know exactly the severity of REAP, how long is a property generally in REAP once it gets to be in there?
It's insane. So it gets in a REAP, then it gets recorded on title. So then something gets recorded with the LA County Recorder's Office. It's probably months, because then they go do an entire reinspection, and then depending on what needs to be done, if you need permits to in order to satisfy the repairs, permits are extremely slow in Los Angeles. So you could be in REAP for a year plus, and then in order to get out of it, once the housing side says, okay, we're ready to let you out of it, You then have to go to city council, and city council has to bless it. And then they have to approve getting it out. So you like have to actually go to city council to get your property out of REAP. But yeah,
Wow.
it's a permanent like blemish on your record.
You can help get in front of this for landlords should they find themselves about to be in such a situation.
Yeah, a lot of times at the general manager hearing, if you're well prepared and you know all of the key things to say to the general manager, a lot of the times you can get extensions and you can get far, winded extensions long out. And another thing is also just having a good rapport with your investigator and making sure that you're keeping them updated with your, like, they want to see that you're making efforts. A lot of times landlords get into REAP because they are not making the efforts. They're not they're not keeping up with the inspector, updating them, and they ignore the general manager hearing altogether. But that being said, for very prudent, responsible landlords who most definitely don't want to be in this, having an attorney who's there advocating for you and making it clear and putting your case together before the hearing and before the department is your best shot at avoiding getting into REAP and getting extensions, because they want to make sure that you are making the effort to repair the building.
How does one know? How does a landlord know he's about to go into REAP? What does it take to get to that point?
Typically, you're notified of it. So if you have an order to comply and it's been months and months and months, you more or less have a sense of it. You can also check online for the property activity report. They should have a section on it that tells you if your property's been in REAP or if it's heading that way. But you'll get a notice of hearing typically in the mail.
Owners can be on the lookout for such things. What are the top 5 things that would send a property into REAP? It seems like it's a process, is it not, or is it something that can just happen?
Like big capital improvements, like major plumbing, major electrical. I'm suspecting deck repairs are going to be in the future because those are a big thing with the state, the city, having its history with earthquakes. I think that's going to be a big one. And just like overall, like dilapidations is another one. Smoke detectors won't get you into REAP, but my tip for smoke detectors is tenants take the batteries out of them. So when you go in
All
and
the
you
time.
replace the battery, take a video of you replacing the battery. Like, it sounds so stupid. Take a video of you doing it, because they will pull it out in an attempt to try to get you into REAP or to get you in further trouble. But major, it tends to be, a big one, the illegal washer dryer. It's like landlords do
Illegal
this.
washer or dryer.
Landlords will put in a washer and dryer without permits into a unit in an attempt to try to get more money because it's an amenity. And you cannot do that. They do not like the illegal washer dryer at housing. They hate
When you
that.
say they, that's the city of Los Angeles.
The housing department, they hate that. An attorney I work with, he has a case where they had 900 units in the valley, or no, 300 units in the valley, who they're like from Texas. They go, hey, we'll put washer and dryers in the unit and get market rent. Their repair bill is $900,000 to get all of those permitted.
Wow.
Yes.
No
And
leaking or anything that was going on. It's just they discovered.
Well, no, the housing did a inspection. And they go, what's
Yeah.
this washer and dryer in the unit? Like, there's no permits for this. And there's 300 of them. And they didn't have permits from them. They go, yeah, no, we just put them in. And they go, no, 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 you cannot do
They
that.
admitted.
I've seen many clients get hot water about the illegal washer and dryer. I just told a client the other day, he's like, oh, the resident manager is going to put a washer and dryer in. I go, no, he's not. I go, you'll get into REAP. I go, do not do that. Like, it's
That's wild.
does not fly. And once you put a washer and dryer into the unit, if you don't get that legalized, then you have to do a rent reduction permanently because you are taking away an amenity from the unit. So then you'll have
so
a
they
permanent
punish you
rent
for the thing you
reduction.
put in there that illegally, but you can't take it back out.
Yeah, like if you have parking included and you take their parking away, you get a rent reduction for that. Like a permanent
City
rent.
of Los Angeles.
Yes. So do not do the illegal washer and dryer. As tempting as it is, you have to have permits for that.
What if you bought the building and you don't know?
You're still stuck with it. I've had clients buy buildings and get into REAP. And they go,
wow.
the seller did
Washer
not
dryers were already there.
Yeah, that happened to my client. He bought 2 buildings from the same seller. And like a month later, he was in a REAP hearing.
Wow.
And they were like, yeah, no, your property is going into REAP. And then they
Wow.
went and re-inspected the entire property and gave him a brand new laundry list of things to do. And that was like years ago. And he
Holy
just
cow.
like had no idea. He had never didn't know what REAP was, had never like the seller didn't disclose it, even though the seller knew there was a general manager hearing coming, didn't disclose it. And then
Then
when
you have the
you can sell the seller, but then it's like that's just more money that I don't have to litigate. So yeah, REAP it's avoidable, but you definitely have to be armed with like the right information and the right representation.
check your permits when you're buying buildings in city of Los Angeles. There's a washer and dryer
Yes.
in there, and its thing is pre 1980. Check it out. See if there's
Actually, all of
anything on the
them.
list.
The REAP program applies to any apartment building, regardless of it being rent controlled or not.
Correct, correct. That is true, isn't it? Is it does it
Mhm.
happen on new construction as well?
Brand new construction tends to avoid all that, but like newer construction, 80s, 90s, especially if you didn't do it then, you thought, hey, I'm gonna like, this thing is newer, you could still get in trouble for it. I had a case where a couple built an
Interesting.
entire fourth unit, like a straight up fourth unit on their
An
triplex.
ADU?
No,
Just
just like added it to the back of the building. And the inspector came out and he goes, what's this whole thing? And they're like, oh, it's another unit. He goes, where's the permits for that? They go, we don't have any. And so the tenants wanted relocation and the landlord wouldn't pay it. They're like, nah. And they go, but our units, and like the tenants started getting this vibe, like, why is the inspector not coming to our unit? But he like didn't have technically jurisdiction because the thing, and then they got in trouble for it. It was like a whole mess. But they just straight up
wow.
built a fourth, and it wasn't like an ADU. It was like they just added a fourth unit to the back of the property of the triplex, like
Another
right up to
three
the property
walls.
line. Yeah, they're like, you just add three, and they put a washer and dryer in it.
Of course they did.
I was like, oh my God, it was crazy. Yeah. But I dealt with a case like that. And I was just like, the brevity of like adding
Wow.
just a straight up fourth unit. And that happens like quite a bit in LA, building the
Yeah.
illegal unit, which is
I've
like
seen
good
the
intention.
laundry room become like our studio. I've seen that, but actual building out, I mean, you can make
Yeah,
it
that
an
was
ADU now pretty
crazy. I was
easily.
like,
It's crazy.
yeah, it was very, I was like, a little stunned. I was like, just a straight up fourth unit. Like, what?
So that leads very well into our first question, Sasha.
Hmm.
You went from employment law to this craziness in real estate. I mean, I know you traded one Manhattan house for another because employment law is pretty wild as well. But what made you specialize in
Well,
real estate?
I stumbled into like employment. Like I had interned at a law firm for one attorney and I knew the other attorney had done employment litigation. So when I graduated law school and I got licensed, I, said, hey, can I have a job? He goes, yeah. He goes, the one attorney I hired like left, like I would be great. So, I took it and I wanted to learn how to litigate because that's kind of like the big boogeyman of law is like litigation. So I did that for like 2.5 years. And one of the clients had some real estate and had an employment matter. And I kind of insisted on helping. I go, hey, I always wanted to have my own property. I always wanted to own real estate income property. And so I'd really love to like help you out and like learn this because one day the idea is I'm going to be a property owner. And so eventually I went and helped him. And that's how I managed his 15 buildings. And from there, it was very like, here it is. And I was like by myself doing it. And it came to the point where I had to pick like what I wanted
Here you
to do.
go.
So after a while, I had basically stabilized all of it because it was kind of, chaos and people had like they like passively managed it. He like had all the good intentions of hiring people, but they just like didn't really care. So after I stabilized it, it was like, hey, can you like just stay on and manage this full time? And they go, yeah. I go, you know what? I probably could help other landlords. Like now that I know all this stuff, I can go help them do this. So then COVID hit. So I couldn't like do evictions. That's was like the thing I was going to go into.
Yeah, you and
So
nobody else. You and
I,
everyone else.
so I was like, doing like, litigation and stuff, cases didn't stop. And I met some real estate brokers because they always, brokers call every day wanting to buy or sell. So he would send them my way, like, hey, can you go talk to Sasha about it? You can talk to her and if it makes sense, she'll get back to me. So I started meeting all of these real estate agents and they go, oh, you're like an attorney. And I go, yeah. They go, oh, do you know this, this, and this? Oh yeah. And one of them goes, oh, like, do you know what, like buyouts are? And I didn't know. And I was like, no, like what's a buyout? They go, like you pay tenants to move them out and you can, rehab the unit, get market rent. I go, okay. They go, yeah, we don't have time. Can you like do that for us? I go, yeah, like, you just offer the tenant. And there was, unbeknownst to me, like a whole world of people doing this. They were not a cash for keys people. And
They weren't attorneys, but they were just.
yeah, and
I
I
imagine somebody with like a big baseball bat knocking on
kind of,
doors.
kind of. So I went from like employment law, which totally like is anti-employer, to like landlord tenant law, which is becoming rapidly anti-landlord.
Anti-landlord.
And so it came this thing like, hey, I don't want to evict, I don't have a reason to evict. I'll just pay the tenant to move. So I started doing a lot of those deals. And what I was kind of realizing as I was going through this process and talking to people, and they go, hey, do you know this person? You know that person? Like they do this. I go, I have no idea who they are. And their whole thing was like pounding on doors, like take this or we're gonna evict you. Or it's like very intimidating, very like
Mm-hmm.
threatening, kind of like, the baseball bat approach. And I
Right.
go like, dude, you're gonna like get sued. You can't be doing that. Like you just can't like knock on someone's door like, hey, do you want to move? And you're like, so I just like had my own approach, which, was like, hey, get an offer in front of them. And I go, there's three kinds of tenants: low hanging fruit, the absolute no, and the negotiate. Like, and that's it. I go, so you'll get one that, takes it with little, changes, one that will ignore you or flat out say no. And then there's going to be the other one that's like, I'm like interested in it. I think about it. And there's some where they don't respond because they like don't understand how to negotiate. So I just figured, I was like, this like solves a lot of problems, because a lot of the times if there's disputes between the landlord and tenant, or there's an evictionable thing, usually on nuisance, right? You might want to try to go, hey, this is not working out. I'll pay you relocation money and you can like go somewhere else. Or, the main one I do is people want to own or occupy, but they don't know how long they're going to live there. Or they just simply, I want to rehab the unit and get market rent. And by and large, tenants get that. And, they get it that it's not about them. But in this kind of like world of law that's totally against the landlord, was like cash for keys. And as much as they get, or they try to demonize cash for keys, there are so many tenants that I deal with, because I deal one-on-one with the tenants a lot of the times. And they're like, oh, like I wanted to move. Like, oh, I could use this
Really?
money. Like I have a client, she goes, hey, I've been wanting to move. And this, I'm in a 2-bedroom. My son left years ago. I don't need 2 bedrooms. I was thinking about renting a room for a friend. I just retired. She goes, this money could help me. Like I could go travel. Like I could do a lot. And she goes, like, no, I had already
Wow.
applied for senior housing. So they're building the building that I applied for. I could stay with a friend and I could go travel with this money. And she was like jazzed about it. And they try to like lead you believe like, no, you're like ruining these people's lives. You're like, everyone has a different circumstance. And there's deals that I don't make. There's deals that are expensive, but my client has a lot of upside. And there's deals that I present the tenant and they're elated. Like I love it. Like I will take that money, like tell me where to sign. So it's just a very like interesting world of what you deal with in that. But it seems to me, out of all the things that I've done, it's like more or less the most kind of peaceful route. Like, hey, do you want the money? Can we make an agreement? Can we agree on a move out date? And 99.9% of them, they sign the deal, they don't cancel it, they move out, they get their check, and they're like off into their like next chapter of life for like both sides, basically.
I think you have such a great business model with this, Sasha, because I know the cash for keys folks, but I've never known. This is the first I've met a cash for keys lady
Mm,
lawyer attorney. So
yeah.
that makes you very powerful from my perspective, because you have the logic and the empathy behind it. It's not like you're there to intimidate; you're there to rationalize, right? And I first thing one of my business partner asked when I told him you were coming on our podcast, he's like, "Just cash for keys? Like, what does she charge for that? And how does that work? So, is there how does you for all the landlords out there who just perked up and found when I said the attorney doing cash for keys? Yes, that's what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen. What? How do you structure your fee? What is your fee structure for such for buyouts?
So I do it, there's two approaches. So a lot of the times landlords can successfully hash out a deal with the tenant. And those are usually in smaller properties. Either they've, managed it for a long time, inherited it from their mom, like they know the tenants, or they just bought it and they've kind of already been acquainted with the tenants. So in that case, if you reach the entire deal with the tenant, then I charge a flat fee of $1,500 and I draft the buyout agreement, the disclosure, and I file it, if those things are applicable, and that's per unit. If you
Per unit, not per tenant, because there could
Per
be
unit, yeah,
6
because
people living in
every
there.
tenant buyouts are by unit. So all the tenants sign to the same unit. So it's just per unit.
Got
And
it.
then if
Even if
you,
there's 6 people in
yeah,
there.
6, I mean,
Got
I've
it.
had like laundry lists of
20.
tenants
Yeah,
on a
right.
buyout. Like you guys all have to go. And that's the caveat with tenants who like move in all these roommates, but they're the main tenants. Like, hey, you got to split the kitty now with all these people because they're all claiming tenancy and you claim that they were tenants. So I've seen that like tenants be pissed about that. Like the hindsight, like I never thought I was going to be offered this money and now I got to go split it with everybody. But yeah, it's per unit. Then if you need help negotiating or you want someone else, like a third party to come in, myself, to negotiate it, I do represent the landlord, so but I charge 3,500, so 3,500 per unit, so 500 up front, and then 1,500 when the tenant signs and 1,500 when the tenant moves out.
Got it. And you negotiate on behalf of the owner.
Yes.
To imagine, at least in my side on the world and the property management side, we have a lot of owners who don't want to be, they don't want their name on anything. They want the LLC name or the attorney's agent of is there due to privacy and such. You find yourself in a lot of those kind of situations.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of landlords who have the LLC, so whoever's the authorized signer of the LLC signs it. And I oftentimes, with the disclosure, I'll put my information because the disclosure is mainly who the tenant needs to contact in the event that they need to cancel the agreement. So I put my information on there. So that's usually not an issue. I can still maintain a lot of anonymity. The only thing that really does get on there is whoever's going to be signing on behalf of the corporation, which, could be an agent, maybe not necessarily the direct owner, but whoever has the power to bind the entity.
Got it. So the you talked about it a little bit in the middle of your discourse, but I wanted to bring it back one more time because you had mentioned how it's beneficial for both sides, the landlord and the tenant. I wanted to wrap that up and put a little bit of a bow on it. Could you explain that one more time in I guess in the way you said it in the middle there, so that we don't miss it. I didn't want anyone to miss the fact that it is beneficial for both sides of the coin when it comes to buyouts.
Well, above all, the buyout agreement is a voluntary lease termination agreement. So it's on terms that the tenant agrees to and the landlord agrees to. A lot of times, tenants might not get all the money or the time to move out that they wanted. And the landlords sometimes pay more money than they wanted to, had a little bit more concessions, but it's voluntary and it's a meeting of minds. So I don't force landlords to pay more money than they can or they want to. And I don't force tenants to accept less money than they can or they want to. At the end of the day, I mean, I've gone back and forth where I go, hey, my client has a firm budget. And it's true, landlords have, for what I always say to people, and I said it to a woman the other day who called me. She had emailed me and said, I don't want to do the buyout. I just can't find an apartment. And then she called me. She goes, ignore that email. And we talked about it. And she's the tenant. And I go, hey, for my client, it's a business decision. I go, the amount of money and the move out date is firm because that's what makes sense for them logistically. That's what they're going for. But for you, it's a major life decision. It's a life change in you. So
Right.
for you, I understand it's going to take time because you have to now plan the logistics of your own life, where you're going to go, what you're going to do, what furniture you're going to keep, what furniture you're going to get rid of, how are you going to downsize, all of these things. Will you move, with family? Will you stay here? Will you stay, all these things you have to think about that you didn't have to think about necessarily until I presented you this offer. So in that sense, I'm very patient and I make sure my clients are patient, but I also do have to some degree firm deadlines. Like you have to be out by this date. So if you want to wait till the last minute or you want to sign the next day, a lot of the times the move out date is kind of one of the most firm parts. Money, I can squeeze my client a little bit more for money, depending, but for the most part, there might be some room. But a lot of the times with tenants, it is a major life decision for them. I mean, it's, they could use the
Their
money.
house, right?
Maybe there's been many buyouts where they bought houses with the money.
Wow.
Yeah, like there's been buyout, they go, hey, like we were thinking about buying a house, and then they had this like wad of cash, especially when interest rates were much lower. A lot of those deals, they got extra money.
Like 2 years
Um,
ago, like just a year and a half ago,
yeah,
you mean?
like
Yeah.
one of the first ones I did, like they got more money out of the landlord, but they go, hey, we're pre-approved and we're gonna put an offer on a house. So if you want us to move, we want to buy this house. So we need like, I think they want like 10 grand more. They go, okay, well, if you move out 30 days earlier than what we projected, we'll give you 10 grand more. So there's different ways you can do it.
Right.
But it's, there's these options for landlords and options for tenants. But definitely people have like most definitely bought houses with buyout money. They've moved, a lot of tenants have moved out of state because the cost of living has gone up for everybody across the board.
Across the board.
There's been a lot of older tenants that I've bought out that have relocated out, either out of country to be with family, or out of state to be with family, to be closer to some sort of relative, grandkids a lot of the times. Or like tenants have gone, hey, like my kids are all grown up and I don't need 2, 3 bedrooms. I want to downsize and like go somewhere else. So there's been plenty of buyouts where the tenants, in different parts of their life, will go, yeah, like I could use this money now and I'll go. And a lot of tenants go, hey, I get it's a business decision. I get, you're going to pay me money, you're going to rehab this thing and you'll get market rent. And I get that that's your business model. So a lot of tenants, quite frankly, understand it.
That is a very empathetic and awesome setting or perspective from both sides, Sasha. Thank you for that. We don't get to see both sides of the negotiations, and I hear so many different things, and I do think your approach is, like you said, non-confrontational, and I think that is the having empathy and just having a conversation to find out where the both sides really are. Because,
Mhm.
like you said, for landlords, for us, it's really just a business decision. It's nothing personal at all. Whereas for the resident, it is. And to understand both sides of that, I think you have a very um, awesome tact approach to that. So thank you for sharing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be considering calling you on my next buyout to come along, because we have quite a few clients asking for us about that. Who's your buyout guy? Well, it's not a guy.
No, I mean, I definitely, I rather enjoy talking to tenants. I've had plenty of tenants tell me, I've had tenants where they don't like management or they don't like the owner. Like, I'm only doing this buyout because I like you, and it makes sense for me, but also like I like you, Sasha. And it really like, to me, I have skin in the game and to some sense because my fee is contingent. But I also like want to sleep at night. So if I don't get every buyout, I'm not sweating it. And for a landlord, it's like, hey, the answer is already no in your mind because you've never approached these people. And the worst case scenario is that they're no and they pay the same rent and they're the same face that you see in the same unit. So in that
Right.
case, it's not really like you can't go backwards, unless there's like an underlying major contention problem, then we weigh those ones a little bit differently. But I also tell tenants, I go, hey, this is, well, I'm a good tenant. Why me? And it's like, it has nothing to do with
It's
you personally as a tenant. Like you're fine. If you were a terrible tenant, you wouldn't be offered this, and you probably would have been on the eviction track a long time ago. But it's not about you personally as a tenant. No one's disputing anything about you as a person or as a tenant. It's a business decision. And once you kind of get the edge of that off, a lot of times you're off to the races, at least having the conversation with them.
right. I can imagine what it would be like with you coming in, especially if there was a self-managing landlord and it was contentious with all the tenants, and you came in as like, I won't even talk to the owner, but you
Yeah.
coming in, and if the owner was self-aware enough of that, you'd be a gold mine for him, because the people might not be accepting the buyout just because they don't like the guy
Yeah. And
or
it's true.
girl or the owner.
And sometimes tenants just want to be heard. And,
Right.
I have ample patience to like hear someone complain about my client. And I go, hey, and I take a lot of, I go, hey, I'm going to take some of that. I've had people say like hilarious things like, my least favorite argument a tenant makes is, well, the owner could sell this and make all this money, so they should give me a cut. And I remember telling a tenant, I go, what if you bought this property and you had put a tenant in it and you needed to move back into the property like my client does, and your tenant said, well, you could sell this for a lot of money, therefore just give me, 5 figures of it. How would you feel about that? And the response was, yeah, I know what you mean. Like, just because you rented a place doesn't mean you're entitled to my client's equity. And that's where I think a lot of times, the advocates talk like that, or tenants get that idea. Like, well, you're going to make so much money. Oh, absolutely. Again, it's a business decision. But if the roles were reversed, the opinions would be too. If you were going to be buying, if this was your thing and you're trying to maximize your investment, and your tenant came at you like, oh, I need like gobs of money. I mean, you wouldn't love that. Like no one, that's like someone taking your stuff. It's like I'm not going to pay you because you rented my place from me. So in that sense, I think I get tenants to go, hey, that doesn't look good for you, so I'm not going to go back with that as an argument. But and I'm like able to like kind of ground tenants, because they'll be like sometimes often like, I feel like my emotional distress is worth like $200,000. And I go, yeah, I also feel like my emotional distress is worth 200,000, but I just can't be demanding that out of everybody. I go, as much as everyone stresses me out, I can't, I don't get $200,000 every time I get an email that's a trash can fire I don't want to deal with. But a lot of
Dumpster fire.
the dumpster fire, I'm like, all right. But a lot of tenants, I mean, I've had tenants go through the moon and come back and like, this is reasonable and standard. But they just want to be heard. Oh, we had, I hate management. I hate the owner. I hate the owner's dog. I hate the owner's, best friend's mailman, like all the, like everything. I don't like all these people. I'm like, okay, well, why? And I have like the patience to like listen to it and then go back to my client and go, hey, did you do this, 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 and this? Okay, well, that's why they're mad. So we're gonna have to come up a little bit. And I do tell my clients, I go, hey, if I have to squeeze you a little bit, I'll squeeze you a little bit, because
What did you do?
like you have the upside in this. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But you do come back like hearing all of these like nightmare stories. Like, did you do this? You're like, no, I didn't do that. This is what happened. So then you just get like the dramas of these two sides. Like, oh, okay, no, that's not what happened. This happened. Oh my God, did they say
Deviation.
that? No. And you're like, oh my God. You guys are both right. You guys are both wrong. But sometimes,
Gosh.
little Jerry Springer out there, like, I mean, there's like the amount of tenants like, I hate this person, but
Wow.
I want this for it. You're like, okay, you hate them, but you like their checkbook. Like, at least like I can work with that. Like, you hate your landlord, but you like their money. Like, all right, I can like we can go somewhere with that. If you hate the landlord so bad that you don't like their money, I can't overcome that problem. Like, that's that's a therapy issue. But it is that, like, it definitely is like, I hate them, but like, I'll take their money. And you're like, okay, let's have this conversation then. But no, they get like, tenants are funny, man. So I'm like, and that's what I like about it. Like, I like dealing and like listening to tenants, because as much as like you would, politicians make it seem like people don't know, tenants are like very smart. And they're like, sometimes they're too savvy for their own good, but sometimes tenants get it. They're like, okay, yeah. Oh yeah, no, that doesn't, yeah, it's not. And I give them ample opportunity, and I go, hey, here's the disclosure. I don't hide the disclosure for them. If you want to talk to the housing, here's their phone number. Here's what the buyout chart is, here we are. And I don't hide it. And a lot of them, come back and they're like, okay, I'll take the deal. Like, this seems fine to me. And then, but always the drama of like, why do they want me? They did this and they did that. And like, 15 years ago, this happened. They haven't replaced my carpet. And you're like, yeah. And you know what? You're going to move in an apartment. And I bet it's not even going to have carpet. It's going to have nice, like, wood flooring. It's going to be great once you use this money and you relocate to a much upgraded unit, right? But like, I need new carpet. I go, your carpet's fine. I
Where to get you
go,
some right in the next unit, right next door.
yeah. And there's been clients where they've done buyouts and they've like moved them to other properties. They go, hey, we have a remodeled unit. If you satisfy the underwriting, you can go there. So we're going to pay you and you're going to go over there and you'll still be like, some tenants do like management. So they go, hey, I want to stay within this company's, portfolio. But yeah, the hilarious stories that I get told from tenants of how much they hate, their property manager, their landlord. They're,
Everyone around them except, oh, wait, you have money in your hand. Maybe
yeah.
the hate's going away a little bit. Money does fix all things, including hatred, I've heard.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Money talks, as they say.
Indeed. And that very leading into our next question, that considering all these crazy complexities with California laws and the legal landscape as it applies to landlords and land or building owners, what advice do you have for landing owners and apartment owners to avoid some of these major pitfalls we're talking about?
So there's two things that are important and they're almost, budget related. To avoid legal pitfalls, you hire attorneys because that's their whole thing is legal pitfalls applicable to what you're doing. So you can't hire your like friend's cousin who does bankruptcy law. They're probably gonna know nothing about landlord tenant. So you want something in a lot of like landlord tenant gets very specialized, as you can see. Like real estate law, sometimes people call me like a real estate attorney, which I kind of am, but it's so specific. Like I know real estate attorneys who don't touch landlord tenant. I won't deal with landlord tenant for nothing in the world. I'll do transaction, I'll do leases, I'll do acquisition, but I am not doing landlord tenant. And like I, stepped away, closing out like, my last litigation cases because I just didn't want to do litigation anymore. And so first, to avoid pitfalls, one, you want to have attorneys that are very familiar with landlord tenant. Like I'm very familiar with cash for keys. I deal a lot with landlord tenant disputes. So I can probably avoid a lot of issues getting exasperated. Having an attorney that's very familiar with code enforcement because there's just so many different agencies that you'd be running into. From a landlord tenant perspective, that's one way to avoid pitfalls is just being proactive about getting the help. Because sometimes it could be more cost effective, even though, attorneys are quote unquote expensive. Sometimes it could be cheaper in the long run because you can bypass. The other thing is, and I believe it's one of your questions, but I'll kind of touch on it earlier, which is staying informed. There are so many resources out there, like on the internet, like this one. I have my weekly newsletter. So I send out not only like my own articles, but I keep at the bottom all the latest news on real estate, whether it's local, state, national. There's
Your newsletter is awesome, by the way. Highly recommended.
Thank you. Then there's I'm with AGLA, I'm a member of AGLA. I do webinars with AGLA. I work a lot with them and they have newsletters. So anytime there's things going on, they know at the local level what the latest meetings are going to be, what they're going to be on, what motions are coming up, So being on just that newsletter, keeping yourself informed. I also do Google alerts. So every day I get almost 20 emails based on keyword searches I give to Google that have to do a lot.
What are your top 3 Google alert for key
LA
words?
City Council, landlord tenant, California real estate. Those are kind of the main ones. I think I might do something specific like cash for keys. I might do rent control, but ones like just dealing with, landlord tenant stuff or like real estate. Google will pull everyday articles from like all over. And so a lot of those I read through and I link in my newsletter and I'll give you the one sentence blurb of what it's about, but you can read the full article that I found. I have no loyalty to any of the sources. It's just if I got the info and it makes sense, I will link it. But I do like the Google alerts have really helped me because that's a lot of how I get the content for the newsletter for the news section. But those are just keeping like updated on it. And then I'm an attorney, so I do get like, the latest appellate decisions or court decisions or kind of like things like that I keep track of. But yeah, like AGLA, they're at every level trying to keep everybody informed. So they'll tell you, hey, here's this new change that's coming up. Here's this thing they want to vote on. So like, show up and don't vote on it. Another thing, or show up and vote no, or say your 2 cents about how this is going to destroy your business. But really, like, keeping yourself informed about things can help you. It's overwhelming, but it's kind of like that's making or breaking business. And that's the same thing with employment law. I mean, and I saw the same, like, employers and landlords are almost the same to me. Landlords in a lot of ways are
So
employers
true.
because they have resident managers. But also a lot of property owners actually have businesses unrelated to real estate. I mean, a lot of or maybe they have property management companies full of employment. You have to have staff. Or, a lot of landlords have some sort of business that they started and then they use, the money they earn from that to go buy their real estate. And so they've had to deal with employment. So, the pool is almost the same people by and large. So I also try to keep track of the employment stuff and what's going on with that because, a lot of it tracks. Knowing unemployment rates is going to help you understand where the market's going to go for rents, which right now the market or rents are going backwards in some areas. And that in part has to deal with unemployment.
Very much
You
so.
know, and just like, and then the new units coming online. So I try to keep track of like where things are going and reading all of the data. But yeah, the biggest thing you can do is keep yourself informed on what's going on and be very diligent with your paperwork.
And I think that's what you're saying, leading into that the next question on that in regards to trends in Los Angeles. What are some of the emerging trends in Los Angeles that are shaping both employment and real estate, which are not so
Well,
far apart?
if you read the news, apparently millennials will never buy a home.
Because
That's what I
it's
just
like
keep seeing.
Sweden, right? We're a
Like
renter society, right?
unemployment's going up, minimum wage is going up, and home ownership's going down. Houses are sitting on the market longer. Interest rates are a huge boon, but it's also just so difficult to get insurance. Insurance is just astronomically more expensive. So trying to swing like a $6,000 a month mortgage for an entry level home or like, a moderate step up from entry level is
Mm.
like just really challenging. For apartments, I do see that in lower income areas like for sure South LA, rents have gone backwards. Rents are dipping in a few other places that are pretty hot markets, but that's by and large having to do with more units coming online. So there's a lot of options. And you might weigh buying, renting a rent controlled unit where it's a little bit cheaper or renting a brand new, unit that has a bunch of different amenities. Like a lot of new units come with in-unit laundry that it would just be so cost prohibitive to put into a rent controlled unit because it's just not, those units are so old, they're not retrofitted for any of that.
And it
Um,
could get you into REAP, as we learned earlier.
as we talked about earlier. So, people have to weigh that, like, do I need this? Do I not need that? Parking is also a thing. If you're in the valley, there's plenty of parking. If you're in LA, parking is like a hot commodity. But I do see kind of this weird, for all of the housing they're claiming we don't have, there's quite a bit of vacancy going on in LA.
Is there?
Yeah, I think one people like tenants, the pool of tenants are also moving out. And it has to do with like also being in a business environment too. If businesses aren't hiring as much, you got to find jobs elsewhere. Or, if you're a tenant, but you're also a business owner, which is a lot of people, they might be moving their business out of state. So then that's one less tenant. There's also people that are moving in together. So people, that you might have two friends staying in a 1 bedroom rather than them each having their own 1 bedroom apartment. And then there's just kind of this overall, depending on where you're at, the vacancies vary because like I deal a lot with South LA. So I'm very like in tune with South LA. And there's a lot of vacancies because people don't want to be dealing with the tenants that are there. And a lot of the tenants are there because they're low income and not low income that it's bad, but like low income, like they're high at risk tenants. So there are a lot of tenants that just got vouchers or have emergency vouchers or have, tiered subsidies and they're not ready to be housed. And so a lot of those tenants ended up in South LA during COVID, because that's where housing was the most affordable, and that's where all the nonprofits could maximize given their budget. So I've seen that kind of change. As far as other areas, I think things are expensive and people are staying, or they're taking money and they're moving elsewhere. They're just not going to stay in California. I saw today, like, I think unemployment's 5.2%, and that's like pretty high from what what we were dealing with, which I think was like in the low threes not too long ago.
Is that LA City? LA County?
I think that's California
California. Okay.
employment. So, you would
Wow.
just take proportionately from that what LA probably mirrors something close to that.
Are there any employment laws that are coming in right alongside of all that? I know there's a lot of real estate laws that are coming out quickly, but I don't track personally, I don't track the employment laws as closely. Is there anything that we should be aware of on the employment side that's hitting the landlord arena?
I mean, I think in July there was a minimum wage increase. There again, I think it's on the ballot, another wage, statewide minimum wage increase. They just had PAGA reform. I haven't finalized reading through it, but that was going to be on the ballot. They were going to try to repeal PAGA, and PAGA is the Private Attorney General Act, and that was like murdering businesses. And what the idea of PAGA was, if you have all these employment law violations, there's civil penalties that the government's entitled to get. And they said, hey, we don't have the latitude and we don't have the resources to go and sue all of these employers to collect our civil penalties. So instead,
back me up a little bit, Sasha, because I've heard lots of definitions of PAGA. I think this is an interesting line of conversation. How does PAGA? What is it? You explain what it stands for, but why should landlords and building owners or property managers? Why should we care? And how do they interlink?
so PAGA is a Private Attorney General Act, and
Mhm.
it allowed employer attorneys to take one employee who could be a class representative, regardless if they had any sort of employment issue related to this, and they could go and sue the business on behalf of all the employees.
A
And
class
say,
action.
hey, and it could be like your wage statement was wrong. Like if you use a mailing address instead of your office's physical address, that was a penalty.
Okay.
And it goes back to all the wage statements across all the employees. And it was like several $100s per wage statement. So
Wow.
you end up getting like, you'd be hit with like $1 million PAGA lawsuit, and it would bankrupt the business.
Like almost like a
So
typo, almost.
yeah, like a typo, like literally like a typo. Like your wage statement was wrong, and you weren't given a chance to like fix it. It was like, no, it's wrong. You could fix it in the future, but you have to pay all this money. So people were going bankrupt over these PAGA lawsuits. Like they were devastating. And the class representative might not even had anything wrong with like their wage statement. So they put on the ballot they were going to repeal it. And why it affects management companies is because if you have staff, they all get wage statements. If you have resident managers, by and large, they're getting a credit offset,
Mhm.
for their hours. But if you have it, a resident manager who's getting a check for whatever reason, it has to have the correct deductions on it. So
It
it
does.
was affecting like in real estate, you're not just a landlord a lot of the times. A lot of like property management companies, you guys have your own real estate, but you also have the business of management. So you are
Right.
employers. So you have to have all the postings and then this and then that and like all of this stuff. So PAGA was a big deal because it was like, the employment attorneys came together with the plaintiff attorneys and the state and said, hey, we have to reform this because you're devastating business, which is the backbone of, the state. And people are going bankrupt and they're leaving the state because they're being hit with these that they can't absorb. And that's going to result in all these jobs being lost. So they revised, they changed it, and they're giving employers an opportunity to correct things going forward to avoid these like massive hundreds of thousands of dollars like class action lawsuits. And why it's a Private Attorney General Act is because the state had to approve of every single settlement because the state got a chunk of it. So in order for it to be worth it for the attorneys, they had to negotiate the highest amount, and get the most out of the employer because they had then
Does the
split it with the
state?
state. Yeah.
Wow. So this in November there's a motion to repeal.
It was going to be on the ballot. And then, and ahead of that, they struck a deal, so it's taken off the ballot because the employers and the employees, essentially, like their respective sides, were able to reach a deal to revise PAGA.
And was that has that revision gone into effect?
I don't know if Newsom signed it yet. I have to like look at it. I'll put it in my newsletter because I've
That's
been
interesting.
needing to like read on it. But there is, I mean, it's not like a complete like win for employers. Like the thing's not undone, but it definitely was a win for employers in the sense that it drastically curbed litigation against them. And a lot of these laws, again, the plaintiff's bar in California is extremely strong. So all of these laws always come with attorney's fees because that's the idea of the attorney's fee is to force submission or compliance by the party who, you know, would be subject to potentially paying the other side's fees, which in California is the employer and landlord.
Wow. Well, any win we will take in this state as long as it's not going more. We don't need things repealed. If you can just take a little bit away from some things, we
Why
can
that's what I feel like needs to be done like across the board. I mean, they've made it so
dial it back a little bit.
business friendly that you have to like step back. And I feel like the same thing with like landlords. I mean, when I got into it, I go, oh, this is like the same thing. Like what landlords go through is the same thing employers are going through. Like you have to reward ambition. And if you're an employer and you make a mistake, fix it. If you're a landlord and you make a mistake, fix it. And I understand ignorance of the law is not a defense, but it's also like how willful are employers being? Like your wage statement, I accidentally messed it up. I'm sorry about that. Like, you
We're all
know,
human.
the penalty, but to be like, I have to go pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, you know, and I have all of these people. Like, I think, I'm not that Tesla got hit with it, but it's so adversarial for employers that Tesla, I think, is moving Fremont out. I think
Oh,
the whole thing's going to Texas.
the first factory. Yeah, he said he was moving SpaceX as well. Last
Yeah.
statement.
And like, those are huge employers.
Right.
Major employers. And it's like California has driven out the entire aerospace business. I mean,
And car
aerospace is
industry.
gone, car industry is gone. And it was always crazy to me that they never worked with like Tesla because California has this huge EV agenda. And what more pride could you have than Tesla being in your home state? And then they just like hated the guy because and it's all politics, but it's like you can't, at the end of the day, we have to get past politics and like what is best for the people. And as much as everyone would want to be their own business owner, at the end of the day, employers need employees and landlords need tenants. You know, landlords
Right.
are not in the business of vacancies, but they're also not in the business of being harassed. And like landlords are not harassing their tenants. Like, quite frankly, landlords have other things to do. Like they really like there's 1,000 other things other than how do I traumatize my tenant today?
Yeah,
Like that is not the landlord's mission. They're like, is your unit
100%.
fine? Are you paying rent? Great. Like if there's a problem with your unit, let me know so it doesn't get worse. But you would think that like landlords spend all day like, ooh, like how do I like traumatize these people? And it's like, nah, like no one has time
Oh,
for that at all.
not at all.
Like, and same
Not
thing
at
with
all.
employers. They're like, ooh, like, let me put all these employees under my thumb. It's like, no, like, hey, can you do the job? Great. Because I got to keep bringing business in. And that was
Right.
a
Right. We gotta
huge
keep moving.
thing, you know, with employers is like, you're the money maker. You bring in work so that people have work. If I don't keep bringing in work, you're not going to have a job. And then like, that's going to be no bueno. And the way they have it in California, it's like employees and tenants who again are the same pool of people, right? Because tenants have jobs. So they're like the
Right.
same group of people that are like
We
kind of
background
against,
check and make sure they do. Yes.
yeah, like and they're the same, like against the same, like landlords and employers are kind of like in the same. And I just don't get how we got so adversarial. Like, but we need each other. Like I can't have a business without a staff, and I can't have an apartment building without tenants. Like that's
Right.
just what that is. But the way they frame it, like landlords have it too good, and like you know businesses have it too. Like they should. Do you know how much risk you take on in those respective roles? You know how much stress is involved, and then you can't project that stress on your staff because God forbid you would get sued for her like stressing your staff out. So you have,
Triggering someone or yeah.
yes, and but you have to get rewarded for that ambition. It's like, yeah, at the end of the day, after I pay everybody and I pay my rent, I pay my bills, and I do this and that and that and that, I get this little money, and then Uncle Sam comes and takes a chunk of it. And then, okay, I could go on vacation with my kids to like Disneyland. But the way people talk about stuff, it's like they're like all Jeff Bezos running around. You're like, you have no, I like how
Absolutely
I've
not.
understood it is they're just legislating the bell curve at this point.
Right, and it's in my view, and what I've seen, or in my experience over the last 15, 20 years in property management, is the best relationships are the symbiotic relationships between landlords and tenants, and
Yeah.
similarly with employers and employees. It's you're in the same world, like you're helping each other. Like I own buildings, and I'm going to, when everyone's paying their rents and the buildings are operating smoothly, I'm making sure everything's getting fixed. So is most landlords I am. I mean, there are those 2% that are bad actors, just like there's the 2% of tenants that are the bad payers.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like to deal with either. No one does. But 98% of everybody are good people, or trying to be. And it's like no one wants to be a slumlord. No one wants to own, trash property and have it an eyesore. No one I know anyway.
No.
And no tenant wants to live in a place like that. So it's like, it's very simple. Pay the rent on time. We'll fix things and make it better. We'll keep the place looking
Yeah.
nice and someplace proud, something they have pride of rentership for, pride of ownership for. And yeah, you're right. The margins are not very high in the industry. They're so much
No.
lower than what the perception is. It's almost crazy.
Well, and it's
Start
a lot
publishing
of
these.
a lot
Helping
of
them.
landlords, they own older housing stock, which is rent controlled. So that has a drastic amount of deferred maintenance. And so when your rents are really low, coupled with, a really old building, it's hard to keep up with inflation. It's hard to keep up with, the rising costs of repairs in general, the materials, the labor that goes up. Then you have the utilities that's constantly going up. The insurance has gone up astronomically. Your property taxes go up every year. And then if you have the building free and clear, great. But if you have it free and clear and you're collecting, $3,000 a month, at the end of the year, you get what, 36,000? That might not be enough money to put in a brand new electrical system. It might not be enough money to do a brand new copper repipe. So, and
It
if you
wouldn't
don't
be.
pull out debt, how am I supposed to pay the debt and then do the repairs? So there, and I've explained this to people before. I go, refinancing is not free money. You don't like pull out the equity and they're like, okay, here you go from the magic money tree. Like you're paying that. So you got to make the money work. And sometimes you can use the money to buy yourself nice stuff. And sometimes you use it to reinvest in a property or you expand the portfolio. But that money you have to pay for every month. So it has to be working. And I think a lot of people, they don't understand that. And they just think, well, you're collecting my rent money. And they just think the rent money is just there every single day and every month, and you're not using any of it on anything. And they have no idea. I mean, like if you really looked at the books of landlords, they're like not great. And they're constantly hammering them. And in my feeling, it's like, you can't let like the landlord drown in all of this. Inflation's hit everybody, but you have to keep the landlord because the government is awful at property management. We know that.
Oh, yeah.
And if you go institutional, there's no rapport. It's like you're just a file. And I have no business in knowing you. I don't care about you. I don't care about your kids. I don't care about your grandkids. I don't,
Right.
tell me what needs to be repaired and I'll repair it and pay your rent on time. Otherwise, you're going into a file for eviction. I mean, there's no
100%
like
revenue driven,
rapport.
right?
Yeah, and that's exactly like, hey, that's the the bottom line. And in that sense, a lot of the landlords that are really successful, like they know their tenants and they get along with the tenants and they can understand and they rationalize with the tenant, hey, this costs money. You've lived here for 15 years. You've worn this place out for 15 years. So if you want this, it's going to cost. And it's crazy to me because there's tenants willing to pay market rent or willing to pay several, like we'll go up to market, like close to it. Like, hey, I get that it costs money. And I had that a client the other day. She goes, "Yeah, the tenant agreed to pay $400, more a month, and we signed it." And I go, "That's illegal." I go, "You can't do that." And what do you mean the tenant agreed? I go, you can't do that. It's rent controlled. But I just remodeled their unit. Not sure why. Like if they needed repairs, that's great. But you just remodeled it for free. I go, all of that, you have to then go to LA like housing and see if you can pass through the cost of it. But you can't just raise their rent $400 even if they agreed to it. And I had a case like that. I had a housing case where
Wow.
the landlord and the tenant agreed and they signed a new lease. They had all these pets and all these new occupants
Even
and
with a
all this
full new
parking,
lease.
whole new lease, and housing goes, pay them back. And he wrote $40,000 in checks back to these two units.
Wow. I,
And
that's
I
the first
felt
I've heard of that on a new lease that was not enforceable if they signed a
it
brand new
was not
lease.
because they go, "Hey, you illegally raised their rent." Because it was a rent controlled unit. And he goes, "Hey, you have more people and more pets and more parking than you were authorized." So they go, "Okay, we'll pay for it." So they came up with the amount of money. It was like, a few $100 more, but it was still less than market. And then they went to housing like 2 years later. And then housing goes, pay them all the money back in the lease. Like the lease is not void. And all the people are now
Really?
authorized and the pets are authorized, but not the lease amount. And I go, "Well, no, the lease is void because
Forced
there's
to
no consideration for that." I go, and then I remember housing told me, "Well, legally you could be right." I go, "Well, this whole thing is legal." I go, "It's you
Yeah, it
issued
just
a
sound
whole
like you
housing
it's
is
like
crazy."
picking and choosing like which parts of the contract are valid. It's either all or nothing, isn't it? Like
Yes.
if you enforce
Well,
one,
that's
it
the
has to
deal.
be unless
That's
there's
the
an
issue.
illegal piece,
That's the
right?
issue with dealing with housing is,
Wow.
you have to know how to get
A
around
new
housing
one.
and deal with housing because they're like in a world of their own sometimes. And they have like really no one above them.
Right. It's like the labor board. It's not a jury or a judge.
Now the
It's
labor
a
board's like,
commissioner or
it's a
somebody.
commissioner like entirely in favor of
Right.
the employee. Like your trial, like it's there for
There's
show.
no trial. There's no trial, by the
Yeah,
way.
like if you have things to
It's just
say,
a
if you have
hearing.
things to say, you're sitting in a room, one side, like I've been in many, many labor board hearings, and it's insane how ridiculous they are.
How is that legal? I don't understand how the housing or
That's why
that labor board thing's legal.
they always encourage you at the labor board to settle it. Cause like the
Yeah.
hearings, like you're not gonna get your way at all at the hearing.
No, not at all. If you get out of there under 100,000, you won. Is what I understand. Right?
Depending on the citation, some of those cases, like the labor board cases, are nuisances, but if you have a big company, they're major headaches for sure.
Completely, completely. Ed, so after all of this, leading into our last question, which why or how, maybe not why, for professionals who think what we're talking about sounds interesting, because in property management, real estate, we do have to be a little bit on the like crazy side. Not you don't have to be crazy, you just have to your days to be different every single day.
Uh-huh.
What key skills and knowledge areas would you recommend someone focus on to get into this career?
Well, I like there's real estate is so vast. There's so many things you could do in real estate. I mean, you could be a real estate agent. You could be an escrow agent. You could be a property manager. You could be a maintenance coordinator. You could be, I mean, like I'm an attorney. There's like, a number of different attorneys. So depending on in what you're doing, if you want to go into real estate, or deal with real estate directly, you first figure out kind of what you like. I mean, there's CPAs that focus solely on real estate. If wanted to be in public accounting, there's, big four that have like a whole real estate division, right? So you figure out what you want to do and you kind of get involved in that. If you don't know what you want to do, but you want to be dealing with real estate, then it comes down to, are you going to get a degree, or are you going to, kind of more of a trade person? Because you can definitely do a lot in real estate and not have no degree.
Right?
You can also definitely become a millionaire and have no degree. I mean, there's like plumbers that are millionaires, there's electricians that are millionaires.
100%.
So then it's like, do you want to deal hands-on with real estate, or do you want to be a vendor to real estate? Because like I'm a vendor to real estate. You're a vendor of real estate, but more hands-on. A plumber's a vendor to real estate. So all of that stuff, you figure out what you like to do and you can get a job in it. There's plenty of jobs out there. God knows people need help. But it takes to be in real estate in whatever facet you want to be in it. You have to be very organized because real estate at
Organized.
every single level is paper driven. It's how good is your paperwork? How good is your paperwork for the bank? How good is your paperwork
Documentation.
for housing? How good is your paperwork for your lease? How good is it that you're tracking the repair requests or the, you know, the lease violations? How good is your, like, literally your tenant ledger? So you have to be very organized and very disciplined. And the landlords that I see who kind of fall to the wayside and the ones that get railroaded by these laws are often the ones that are just like it was passive for so long for them. Like I've had clients that to this day, their tenant ledger is on a legal notepad and they write, here's this month's rent and here's the check that came in. And they have like no
Dotted line down the
software.
middle.
Yeah. Like they have no software. It like, and they just have like a wad of tenant ledgers for like all the units. So, you know,
Go get those
obviously you
too.
cannot be adverse to technology. But if you're like a coder, I mean, there's like I mean, real estate now is technology driven and DocuSign, Appfolio, Yardi, whatever it is, all of that stuff. You know, your iPhone, you're taking photos, you're sending out work orders, you're documenting stuff. Um, but you have to at the core be extremely organized.
Extremely organized, and that's something you can develop, right? Like
For
organizational
sure.
skills. For sure. I mean,
It to a degree, people kind of you had their like I'm extremely organized. None of my siblings are. I don't know
really,
why me, but I have four brothers and I'm extremely organized and not one of them is organized. I don't know if it's because I'm the only girl. I don't know. It's because I have a type A personality. I don't know. If it's because I take on more of my mom's traits. My mom is extremely good with paperwork. My dad could like care less about paperwork. He was like, I can't do the paperwork thing. Okay. He's like, I hate paperwork. So, but he always taught me, you know, when I was younger, he's like, hey, banks love paperwork. They love organized paperwork. And I've dealt with banks. I deal with banks all the time. You know, with the P&L, the operating statements, as you call them, the annual, where's your tax return? Where's it this? Where's it that? Where's your bank statements? Where's, you know, all this? Um, Having it organized and readily available makes your life so much easier, especially like when you have a mortgage every year, you have annual underwriting where every year they look at your property and the bank is like, not only are you in this bill, like you basically work for the bank as a landlord. Like people don't see it that way. But like if you don't own your thing free and clear, like you work for the bank. Like
that's
you're
right.
flogging it for the bank because the bank comes, hey, where's your insurance? Hey, where is it? Hey, we came and looked at it. Why is this not fixed? Like I had a
Why
client,
is there a barbecue right
yeah, I
there
had a
under that,
client who
beneath
who
that
bought
balcony?
was it Freddie Mac back loan? I think it's Freddie Mac. And they had a laundry list of stuff. And then they wanted like this insurance that like doubled the cost of insurance. And he goes, hey, aren't you supposed to be like pro landlord? Aren't you supposed to be like helping out landlords? They're like, yeah, sorry. And then the building, it was just like, you need a new
Yeah, but
roof, you need a new driveway, you need a new electrical system. You need like, and if you've seen insurance renewals, it's it's the insurance that goes, hey, we're not insuring you because you don't have a new electrical system. You're like, dude, this thing was built in 1958. What do you mean? They go, no, we're going to cancel your insurance if you don't do a whole brand new electrical in 30 days. You're like, what do you mean in 30 days? But
it's
the
always
bank
30 days
requires that
too.
insurance.
It's
And the bank says, hey, you need to have that insurance. And if we put forced insurance, it's going to be 10 times more expensive and like 10 times less coverage. So you every day are flawed, and the bank is at like people do not know. Like depending on what bank you have, and they're more cautious now because especially with loans that are low interest, they're like on it because they're like, man, our like interest is too low on these loans. And I see, and they come every month. Hey, where's your rent roll? Hey, why is there a vacancy? When you can fill the how are you filling the vacancy?
wow.
I've had
Well,
like
like
I have
micromanaging
mortgages
their
like
loans.
that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And people don't get this when they think like, oh, the landlord has it good. You're like, you work for the bank. Like every
Indeed, you
month.
do. And
And
the
your
health department
mortgage is the
and
first
the
payment
city.
that
And
clears. And then after that, you're working for the insurance company. And then after that, you're
right.
working for the county for the property taxes. And then after that, you're working for housing to make sure all of this stuff, like housing and tenants united. And then you get like, maybe if you have a positive month, you're working for Uncle Sam to give him like his cut. Very few landlords often have to have another career or another business, and the real estate they subsidize. A lot of people also don't know that. Like,
Oh,
basically,
yes.
landlords pay to have tenants living there. When you look at all the expenses at the end of the day, and why would
Mhm.
they do it? In the hopes that one day there's equity. Maybe
For a long enough timeline.
yeah, or I'll work it out long enough and I'll pay off the mortgage and then I'll give it to my kids and they'll have a better life than I did. I'll set them up a little bit better. Which by then, usually those kids are like in their 40s or 50s by the time they inherit the real estate. It's not like you're 18, you're like, look at me, I'm a trust fund baby. You're like, no, that like they're like really my grandkids at that point might be like in a better position, like 2 generations out.
Completely like, why won't you die, Dad? I'm like, I'm trying. I'm trying.
I'm
I
trying,
don't
but
know
housing's
why.
keeping me alive for these repairs. No, man, like the sheer stress keeps your adrenaline going at that rate.
So true.
It's so true though. Like you really like after I got in, like, and I don't own any real estate, and like I have one client that I help oversee everything, and I feel like I'm working, like I'm stressed out. I'm
It's
like, where's my emotional distress compensation from the bank? Everyone's like, hey, where's this paperwork? And then like I have one loan, like, hey, we need 12-month trailing. So then you have to like go to last year's paperwork, and then you have to get, yeah. Freddie
that's
Mac, man. If you have a Freddie Mac back loan, those are some of the most paperwork intensive loans.
right, because
Like,
it's that's a fourplex and below, right? On those.
oh no, is it?
Um,
I don't know if it's Freddie Mac or Freddie Mae. This one is like 21 units, and every month
oh
I'm
wow.
constantly
Okay.
reporting to the mortgage company. Every single month.
21 units. Wow.
Yeah, in South LA. It's not even like, hey, it's 21 units in prime Beverly Hills. It's like South LA.
Maybe
And
that's maybe they got their risk matrix and that's their
definitely. And
causing.
the guy is not even like, by the way, the bank is usually not local. Like this guy, he works at a desk in Virginia. He was like, yeah, I see on the news, it's pretty, pretty crazy in LA. He goes, I didn't know LA was so bad till I moved to this department and they gave me a bunch of LA landlord files. And he like works for the bank. He's like the loan liaison. He goes, yeah. And he like didn't get it. I remember dealing with the banks
Wow.
and
Really?
like COVID, and I go, tenants aren't paying. They go, what do you mean tenants aren't paying? So I had to ask for mortgage forbearance for a client.
Hmm.
And it was like they're not paying. Like California says they don't have to pay. Oops, sorry. And then they're like, oh yeah, you're right. And they were, I mean, like
Like, oh,
banks
never
were like,
mind.
what? And then they were like forced to give forbearances to landlords because California decided like you just don't pay
No
rent in
evictions.
California. It
Right.
was like, and all these like and I would ask like, hey, where are you at? Like, well, I'm in Dallas. We don't have that. Like
No.
we don't have an
No.
eviction moratorium or a rent free
Right.
here. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, we have it. It's alive and
COVID
well.
was a whole different story for Los Angelinos, especially if you had children under like 6 or 7 and or owned property, investment property. I
Oh,
had
it
the
was like
fortunality of having
having a
both
job,
worlds.
having
Oh my
investment
gosh,
property, and having elementary school children during COVID. I
that
was
was
like,
my world.
no one gave any of these people like medals of honor. Like, if
I
you're
was,
a landlord and you were a parent and you were working, like, hats off to you.
yeah.
Like, I'm flogging it
Thank
and
you.
I have
Thank
a
you.
duplex and I'm like just trying to keep things going. And so many landlords, it was so sad. So many landlords like sold real estate and they're
Hmm.
like, yeah, I was gonna
It,
save it for my kids for generational wealth, and it's gone. Like yeah, I paid the cap. I can't deal with it.
it was just piling up, right? During COVID, it was. I knew deals that people had hundreds of thousands of dollars in earnest money that just walked away when COVID hit. I'm like, I can't even start to deal with what's going to happen or deal with it, and they just walked and like
It was
left the
crazy.
state.
It was crazy. And it's like, I always tell people, I go, you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I go, can you imagine, you know, you working so hard for something and someone saying, hey, you're no longer going to get paid for that. Like you showing up to work every day and then saying, well, you have to show up to work every day, but we're not paying you anymore.
Yeah,
But you
but
still
you have
have
to
to
go.
continue to work.
Yeah,
or
because
like
you're
you're
a
in like
first
major
responder.
trouble. And I feel like for a lot of people, it really, like for the future, it's like if I didn't know what I knew, and I was just like a lay person, and I was like a tenant, and I knew like, oh, look at all my rights, I would like, I would think about it like, you know, I could own the apartment building. And a lot of people, it's like, that's one day I'm going to be the landlord. And I've like talked to tenants, they go,
All
yeah,
right.
like my dream is I want to have an apartment building. Like, I want to be you one day. Not me, but like my client. And but you see like all the rights that come down and all these laws that come down and how unbalanced they are. And it severely discourages like the next generation from getting involved in that. Like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
Especially when you know the people, because it's the bad seeds, right? Like all these laws are for the bad seeds. There's very few bad seed landlords and there's very few bad seed tenants. But once you have one, it really spoils it for the rest. Like, it can
Really
take
does.
one tenant to derail an apartment building, and people go, we can't. Like, I've had clients like, yeah, we moved in these great tenants, they moved out because of this tenant.
All day long.
Like, this tenant has harassed like the entire building,
Because you can't get them
and
out.
you can't get them out because they're like they have so many rights to be there. And as much as everyone else, like the majority is like, hey, we would love to see that person go. They're like
Right.
killing the vibe of the building. You're like, I can't. And
Right. And
you want to provide that quiet enjoyment for them, right? And but it's like I like my hands are tied. I can't do it, even if I
you
wanted to.
completely can't.
And
It's
then to be a
city
tenant
of
and
LA
be like,
especially.
I got to go deal with it. Like, can you imagine being the tenant and like, and you go like, complain to your landlord and it ends there, right? But like, can you
And
imagine
landlord's
being
like,
the landlord dealing with it? And so a lot of like the young generation, like, why would they ever want to be landlords? And it's such a respectable like choice. Like, it's such a, I mean, it's a job for some, it's passive income for others, but it's like a really tough thing to do. And to like want to be like, I want to provide housing for people and maintain it and like beautify. Like, if you have older architecture, you're like, hey, I would like love to paint this thing. And like I would love
right.
to do new landscaping and I would like, love to beautify it. And there's not enough money to do it. And to see like the next
So
generation,
dead on.
the next generation, like, why would I get involved in that? Like, I'm gonna go be
Yeah.
a TikToker. Like, why would I
Yeah.
ever be a landlord? Like, you kidding me? Like, I know how
Right.
crazy I am and like how my friends are, my neighbor, like why would I deal with that? And I think the kids coming up, I'm hoping balance things because things kind of got real skewed. And I feel like, this upcoming generation, those kids are like a little more like tough and no nonsense. Like that doesn't make sense. I'm not going with that. So I'm hoping common sense prevails a little bit stronger in the
In
youth
Z,
and Z.
yeah.
Alpha. I think we're like at
Oh, is
Gen
it
Alpha
Alpha?
now. Oh my,
Is it
I was
Gen
like,
Alpha?
we
Yeah.
went through
Because
the
there is.
whole cycle. I was like, oh my God, Gen
But
Alpha.
why not A and not Z?
I think well, Gen Alpha is A because we went through Gen Z. So to restart, it's now Alpha. So I guess
I
they're
know,
gonna
but
go by like the Greek alpha. I don't know, man.
so it
And
should
I
be
only
Zeta,
know
Generation
because
Zeta.
well, I know that the whole like I only know these things because the news talks about it. They're like Gen Z, like millennials are not buying houses because the boomers ruined it. And you're like, dude,
It's not.
you're trying to pit me against my dad. Like my dad's a boomer. So I have to go, Dad, you ruined my chances of being a homeowner. Did you know
Shame
that
on
the
you, father.
news said? Oh my God, it's like so crazy. I think I wrote that once in my newsletter. I go, as a millennial, I've come to find out I cannot buy a home. So,
I can buy,
okay.
but you can buy an apartment building. You can do.
But
You
then
can
I'm
buy an
like, why
apartment
would
building
I
and a
buy
house.
one so people could traumatize me about it? Oh my God. I don't know. They've got to fix it. They've got to reward ambition. And like it's that simple. Like if you work hard, you play hard. That's a long-standing principle. If you play hard and don't work hard, you go nowhere very fast. But if you
Oh,
work
real
hard,
fast.
you can play hard and you can go somewhere. Very
Absolutely,
simple,
Sasha.
very simple philosophy, but apparently
Very, very simple.
it's been lost on all of our politicians.
Well, as you and I were discussing over lunch the other day, it's the politics and what's real and what people want just seem to be at a big disconnect right now. I mean, I know it's been like that throughout history here and there, but especially right now with like capitalism, at least in California, is skewed. I think we forgot what it means. What capitalism
Well,
is
I
defined
think
as.
people are really hung up on like the bad, right?
Right.
Like historically, here's all the bad things about America. And you're like, okay. And I think as a country, we do work towards that. Like
Negative
by and
bias.
large, like on an individual level, I don't think people are like inherently racist, you know? And in LA, it's like we're a melting pot. So
Oh,
across the
all day.
spectrum, depending, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, where you came from. We could all be in the same coffee shop living our lives and not care. There's no animosity. And so that's kind of the benefit of me living in LA and growing up here. There was never a sense of like we are different. It's like, oh, you
Right.
look different, I look different, we're different. And that's great because then we can have a conversation. If we're all the same, it's kind of bland.
Yeah.
So
Welcome to Los Angeles. Right.
The United States is by and large that. It's, you know, a melting pot of people in history. And has there been bad? Like most definitely. But the core things about America that, you know, and I'll like point back to the founding fathers, they got a lot of things right. But one of the things was, you know, if you work for something, you should be able to keep it. And if you work really hard, you get rewarded for it. And if you had, you know, if you took on the risk of starting a business and employing all these people and making sure that every week they get their paycheck paid or every 2 weeks, whatever it is, and that you're bringing in enough business and that all your books are right and that you can go to the bank and get a loan so you can, you know, get a new bigger building so you can hire more people. It falls on you. You answer everything. Your employee at some point clocks out, but they don't have to deal with the whole overarching thing. But if you do that, you can make a lot of money. And if you're an employee and you work hard, you could make a lot of money. You can either maybe go out on your own one day learning all that you've learned, or you could be a very high level, high earning manager. And they've managed to be like, if you're like make money and you're in the middle class, we're just going to have to eat you alive. And they keep conflating like the mega wealthy with the like middle class. And they keep describing the middle class as like the rich that they want to destroy. And it's like, no, you're never, we will never tax corporations the way people want them to be taxed. It will never happen. Like it's not going to happen that way. And so as you start moving through the bell curve, the only people you can really tax and hold their feet to the fire are like the middle class. But again, there's only so much money that you can take from them before you stop rewarding their ambition. We're like, hey, it doesn't make sense for me to have a company anymore because my employees hate me. I can't get money. The taxes are eating it alive. You know, like I can't go and invest in real estate because then I have a whole new set of problems on me. So they really like skewed this whole, instead of fixing and tweaking things to correct them, they've just like, oh, we're just going to undo the whole thing and destroy America. And it's like, but America and like that freedom is why people come here every single day from other countries. And you have to preserve
So
that.
true.
Like people come here like whoa, America. Like I like a paralegal that works sometimes for me for stuff that I need for my cases. He's from Ukraine. He's like, man, he goes, America is like amazing. He goes, like you could do like everything and like whatever you like. Can you like imagine? Like my friend went to Japan and he came back. He goes, I couldn't wait to come home. He goes, I love Japan, but like
Really?
I can do whatever I want in America. Because I come home, I could go to the coffee shop when I want. I can get tacos. I can get Indian food. I can get Korean food. I can get Japanese. Like all of these things I can do. He goes, I drive around in my little car, in my little bubble, and I'm like, you know, listening to my music and I'm like going about my life and no one cares. No one's looking at me. No one has an opinion of me. I'm like going about my life. He goes, in Japan, he goes, you know, I felt like people were a little depressed. They looked at me like, you know, a little like they knew I was different. They knew I wasn't Japanese. And he goes, like the vibe, he goes, it was great. It was beautiful. They have a really cool culture, but I couldn't wait to come home because like I really understood freedom. Like I really got it going somewhere else. I was like, oh yeah, no, we have it good in America. And we do. Like we really like
We
America's
do.
amazing. And I feel like we have to stop
Absolutely.
this rhetoric that we're all divided by like, you know, like politics. well, if you're Republican, I can't be your friend because I'm a Democrat, or vice versa. And I've had people tell me that, like, I can't, if you're a Republican, I can't talk to you. And it's like, no, we are
Just
all united under one flag. It's the flag of the United States of America.
it's not black or white.
That's it. And we all, like, I think by and large, everybody wants the same dream, which is if I work really hard, I'll play really hard. And like, that's it. And then I can set up my future for my kids and I can have these investments and I shouldn't have to be worried about because I'm trying to be successful. I am successful that I'm now a target and I have something to lose. And I think that's where people feel like we're losing it. Like I shouldn't be afraid of what I have. Not that I have to tout it to everybody, but if I have something to lose, I really have something to lose. And I think that's the main concern that everybody has. And if you're, someone who's young and ambitious, you'll feel that in your 30s. You'll feel it 10 years from now. You'll feel like, oh, this is my ceiling. Because and it wasn't mine that I wanted. It was like, it was put there by politicians.
Yeah, you don't. How do you put a ceiling on your dreams, right? It's like you're
Well, yeah, and
capping
it's
your
like,
dreams off.
I love not paying my rent and I love having minimum wage, but you can't scale that. Like at some point, it's like, no, you want your own house. At some point, no, you want your own business. And the getting involved in it is so confusing. Like you will make so many mistakes trying to set up a business and you will do things so wrong. And
That's the
when you
fun
do it
part.
wrong, it will be like thrown in your face. And that's where I feel like, hey, we have to bring back this, like, we're all united. If you're an employee, there's no shame in being an employee. If you want to have
No,
a business, you learn a trade, you learn something, you get your skills down and you go out on your own and you risk it. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. You work up and a lot of people job hop and that's how they make money. Like I went from this job to this one and I got a raise every time. There's multiple ways to skin a cat, so to speak, in America. But I think we need to like all come to that. Like capitalism isn't inherently bad. There's definitely things you have to
no.
curb with it, but like we should all like not work towards this, like we need to bring down America. And I feel like I don't think that's really how people feel, but you feel like you hear that in the news. Like, oh, like basically without saying like we have to destroy this thing, like we have to destroy capitalism. Like, no, you just probably need to exercise some more self-discipline. Like, do you need to buy clothes every single week? Probably not, you know? But is it okay if you do? Like, yeah. But it's like like what does my grandma say? Everything in moderation, even moderation. Like, yeah, you need like you need basically we need to have
It's
balance. And
good.
right now we're like a little out of balance with these things. And I'm thinking we will rebalance out because that's kind of how, nature naturally progresses. But yeah, we're a little out of balance, so to speak.
Someone, wish I could quote who it was, but they brought it back to where Americans, where our roots are from, what our true ancestors are, and it's from all kinds of different places. Whether you got
Mhm.
here from immigrating or from being forcibly brought here to being part of like missionaries. I mean, we all arrived here. Our backgrounds are so diverse. However, somewhere in there's a common thread, and that was the like badass, like entrepreneurial risk taking. I'm going to sail off over the edge of that horizon and I might fall off or be eaten by a dragon. Or I
I'm gonna find
survived the
out.
bottom of a slave ship being bound and like I didn't want to, but somehow I stayed alive next to 400 other people in the most worst conditions ever. But my genes survived, so I'm still a badass, even though I made it through all that because I lived through that somehow. Yeah,
Mhm.
and that's all of our ancestors. They were all just a bunch of badasses one way or another because they lived through that. They made it through the pioneering, whatever it took them to get here. And that's in all of us. And I think that's a different type of person when you compare our American culture to like the English. Like, why aren't they, from there, like, how many entrepreneurs per capita? If you look at those studies, it's a lot more here than any other country. And it's to me, and this is no scientific basis I'm basing this on except from just a conversationally. I do know that there is a study, I wish I could cite it, from how many entrepreneurs per capita but based on population in America versus any other country in the world. Or I put that in chat GPT and figure it out real quick. It's
Mhm.
America by far.
Yeah.
And Well, why is that? Well, because we had to risk it all to come here. Most of us, or somewhere along the line, our ancestors had to, or were forced to. One way, either way, same result, same outcome.
Well, and I
And
feel like we're all here, like regardless of how we are, it's 2024 and we're here. So how do we
right,
make the best of like we're here? Like we're here
yeah,
on
exactly,
together. So how do we make the best of it while we're here?
right,
It doesn't matter what's happened in the past, so to speak, but it's like how do we keep going forward together? And
right.
that really is like America. Like we persevere. Like we will, I mean, we've have so many like scientific feats. I mean, down to like athletics. How many gold medals do Americans have? I mean, how much
Right.
like we just like, hey, is that a thing? Let's dominate at it. And then it's like
Yeah.
we fight for everything. And like we constantly are pushing to be better. And I feel
We
like
choose to go to the moon.
well, and it's like, and I feel like we've kind of like lost, like, no, we keep pushing. Like we keep pushing the boundary because that's what we do. Like if there's something, we will master it. And that's like a drive that we have. I mean, that is like the core. It's like, no, we're driven people. And I just, you know, and
100%.
I feel like people know that, but that's not being hit home enough. I think the news focuses more on, hey, here's all the things that you can't do, and we're gonna like, you know, which we take care of our own. If you are disabled, you know, mentally or physically, we will take care of you. We don't leave anybody behind in that sense.
Yeah,
Could we improve upon that? Absolutely. Always.
always.
But we can improve on anything in general because things are constantly evolving. But we have safeguards for those things because we think about it. And we have, hey, if you need somewhere to live, we'll get you somewhere to live. But if you
Right.
want to live in a really nice studio in downtown LA with a panoramic view, we can't give that to you. But if you know, want an apartment, we can start
Right.
you there. We can help you get a job. We can, you know, make sure that someone's checking it. Like we have those things. But you have to want it more than anybody. And that's what America is. Like the individual, if they want it, they can get it. And there's very little that's going to stop them. And that's what I always feel about when I see these laws and how they're going. I go, you cannot stop the American. I go, we like
Right.
in the middle class is really like the core group of people that is the backbone of the country. Like you cannot stop them. You cannot tell an American you can't have your business and persevere, and you can't have your house, and you can't have your car, and you can't have your 2.5 kids, and you can't have your picket. Like you don't tell an American they can't have that.
Because that's the American dream, and then it all dissolves if
And
we can't.
and the American
We
dream is like not a failure of a dream. Now, is
oh,
there like pros? Is there different ways to go about it? Yeah. Is the bank
always
involved in the American dream? Like absolutely. But
100%.
it's like, yeah, I got a mortgage. A mortgage is not the worst thing on the planet. You know, you buy a thing
Oh,
and you pay a mortgage, and you can be smart about your mortgage. I
that
mean, you
was
buy your
what you do
first
with the mortgage, right?
yeah,
There's all
I mean,
kinds of
your first
mortgages.
home, get a duplex so that you live in one unit and someone lives in the other, and you're offsetting the mortgage, and you have more deductions that way because it's now an income property, even though it's 2 units. And you probably could buy, in some cases, a duplex cheaper than a house. But it's like if you work
Yeah.
hard and you put in the effort, you could be no one. You can like barely graduate high school. You could have no degree. And I have clients that go, I barely graduated high school, didn't finish community college, and they're millionaires. And they could not do that in any other country. And I have plenty of
100%.
clients who immigrated here from other countries, very poor countries.
Same.
But it's like you can do anything. Like you like really can like, and that's like America. And that's what people are really like when they look at America and they come here, it's like, wow, you guys have so much, we have so much natural resources here.
Mhm.
It's incredible. Look, I just went to like Yosemite. I was like, whoa, like we have this in like California, like this is America, and we have like all these national parks. Like you can go and look at this insane nature and be like, whoa. And like we have that, and we work at it and we preserve it.
And we preserve it. Like I said, that was a good
Like, and that's the
next
core
point.
thing.
It's like we
Like
care.
we said it as like we care about these things. And we want everyone to have access to it. And so I really feel like that needs to be the narrative, not like, hey, this politician's gonna ruin America, or this politician's gonna ruin America, or everyone, and America needs to be ruined, and America's, shit. Like, honestly, if you're an American and you think America's shitty, as much as you can walk right into the border right now, you can also walk right out of it. Like, go somewhere else. If you have a US passport, you could go anywhere. Do you know how crazy that if you're a born American, like you have like
Most people
carte
don't
blanche almost
understand how that. Yeah,
you have no idea. People cannot come here in the way you could go anywhere with the US
right.
passport. Like go
Under
for
full
a month.
protection of American law, for sure.
Like go to another country, get a visa, go live in a third world country for a month, and then tell me how bad America is.
And come back here and let's talk about racism and inequality.
Yeah,
Exactly.
go to different countries and see how racism is there. Is there racism? Yeah, you can't prevent that, but is it as prevalent as they make it seem? No.
Not
And
that I've witnessed.
they're trying to rewrite history in another way, which is like, a totally other topic. But it's like you like you can't put, to some degree, like a monetary value to something that's historically happened. Because if you did that, it's like, well, then every country is going to have to pay all, like, we're going to have checks going everywhere across the board to all these
Right.
people if you want to like rewrite history.
Right.
But it's like, yeah, and there's a setting for that, and we could talk about that, but we can't also focus solely on that issue to the exclusion of like everybody else. And it's like, there's multiple races that came here. There's multiple races that partook in like the creation of this country. And it's like, and I really don't feel like we need to overly focus on that when the country is comprised of multiple races. And when you go and you look at who are some of the wealthiest people in the country by race, it is not white people.
Really?
Yeah, you should like look that up. But some of the wealthiest
I haven't looked that one up.
nationalities in the United States, it's not white, is not the number one wealthiest.
That's very interesting. We'll have to make sure we highlight that on the on the highlights clip from this.
And if you are from here, I think it's hard to see. But if you immigrated here or your family immigrated here, you see America for like all the opportunity that it is. And like how lucky people are to be here, like second generation or even first generation, like legal citizens. And like some people have never gone back to countries their parents were from. Like they have no idea what it's like. And it's like you have so much freedom here. And we focus on like being like this victim mindset. Like everything is back, not everything is bad. Like the sky is not necessarily falling. But you can't lose like sight of
not at all. Right. America is not perfect by any standard. It's not even good. It's just we're 100% X times better than the next one. That's all. Whatever they are, even if the next one's
if there's something better,
minus one, we're still 100%, 100 times better than that minus one. Yeah, that's the thing. It could be that could just bring us to like plus one.
But if you go and look at all these other countries and you compare the United States, like there's no other government that beats ours.
Yeah. Like, and even if it's completely crap, theirs is way, 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 way worse.
Yes. It's
I know from firsthand experience, like I'm not just talking up the tree, that I lived in Costa Rica for a year and a half doing business down there, and Costa Rica is a second world country, and in my opinion, it's not even third world, but they cannot figure out how to pave a road. Cannot still to this day cannot get it through legislation and how to properly pave roads. Don't know why. No one knows why. They don't even know why.
That's like another thing.
It's like that.
So much on like all of these things to be mad about, but I really do feel like we need like a budget committee in the United States. I'm like, can we like? There's a lot of potholes in LA. Like, can we just for a moment, can we just talk about that? Like, hey, I understand that you're mad at landlords and the rent is too high. I understand, but like, can we also discuss the just overwhelming amount of potholes?
Yeah, like, the suspension we have to pay for our cars.
I forget. They might have been in Compton, but it was a couple and they were filling potholes and the city fined them. And they're like, hey, we complained to you about the public. Go, you can't fill potholes.
You didn't have a permit.
You don't, yeah, you don't have the permit. We like don't know what asphalt you're using. Like blah 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 blah. When like to some degree, I get it, but it's like also like, well, why you got like you, the government, are taking like a ton of money to do this. So like, if you're not going to fix the pothole, I want my money back. That's the one thing
Right.
about America. Like, we need like a budget oversight, like or
Radical transparency into like where we can log
oh my
in and run
God, like
reports,
I
you
want to see
know?
the budget. Like, where's the pothole line item?
Budget versus actual for my
Oh
community.
my God. Like that's the one thing. I'm like, we have like too much with much freedom comes much responsibility. And I feel like the government, I go, hey, you guys are there overstepping all of the time. Why are the
All the
potholes not
time.
fixed?
All the time.
Also,
Why are the potholes fixed? That's like the
and then like the
smallest
city,
common denominator.
we have like we're like losing like outdoor lighting because the copper is being stolen. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, you guys have a lot of stuff to be worrying about. Like a lot. Like the landlords are like just kind of give them a break. Just like for a few minutes and just talk about the fact that, all the streets, which are your responsibility, not lit right now. Can we like how are
Yeah,
we gonna fix
the sidewalk you made me put in when I built this thing because it wasn't one there. It's dark because the
yeah,
light doesn't work.
which the landlord had to put in. Like,
Which made me put in
and the
there, and now it's
sidewalk,
out.
if your sidewalk is broken, LA City goes, yo, we don't have like they had a sidewalk repair program, and so many people complain about sidewalks. They're like, you know what? We're just gonna fold the
Shut it
program
down. Oh
and
my
just let
gosh.
you do it. Like, we'll just give you permission to get a permit to fix the sidewalk. And we
I
won't even I think you can get reimbursed by the city. But there is like a sidewalk program. Like the property owner can fix the sidewalk. Like you do it. We do not have the
oh
time to do that.
well, thank God. I'd rather do it myself anyway. Probably better and faster
But
for
like the
sure.
whole like, aren't you guys getting like money for this? Like I could have sworn one of the 1,000 taxes you guys got going on here. One of these was for infrastructure somewhere.
One of them was for a whole bunch of homeless
All the well,
housing too that never
they had
went
to add
anywhere. Measure
all these
H or
bike
something like
lanes.
that.
Oh, the
Wasn't it?
homeless, none of that money goes to the home. All of it goes to nonprofits. You should go in South LA, you should go to the 21st Street Bridge, just west of Broadway. And you should see how many times a week they clean that bridge out. And like right after they clean the bridge, the homeless people are right there. They're like, are you done?
Wow, just build it back up.
Like the homeless budget is like a whole, like that's a whole other podcast of like what, but I'm just more concerned, like, why?
We have to come back for a part two.
So like there's just so many
Just
things the city
Sasha's
is
rants.
ignoring. Oh my God. Like you're here like whining about like for all the sidewalk vending, half the other sidewalks that aren't vended on are broken. Otherwise there'd be a vendor on them. Like, what is this? There's just so much like nonsense. Like the city is so not they put in all these bike lanes. I've seen like 3 bikes. It's
Right,
unsafe to
because
bike on
it's
the street.
unsafe to bike.
Just in general, like even if there's lanes, why would I want to be on a skinny piece like aluminum frame bike next to a monstrosity of a vehicle? Like, can you imagine being a bike and get
Downtown
hit
LA.
by like a Chevy Tahoe? I'd be dead. I don't want to be
Yeah.
biking anywhere in the city. You can
We're
have bike
trying not to run
paths.
over the hypodermic needles or glass from the night before from all the homeless that just cleaned
Oh
up their
my
little
God.
encampment from the
They
sidewalk that's now in the
all of
street.
LA upside down for bike lanes. The other day I was in Santa Monica and this guy was riding his bike on the street. He was riding a bike on the street and the bike lanes are going that way and there's no bike lanes on the street and he's on the street with no bike lanes and there's all these bike lanes going all these other ways and he's like, nah, I need a bike this way with no bike lane, just like it's the car and him. Like it will be what it will be. And I was like, why did we have? I go, that was
But
millions of dollars for those bike lanes that guy's not using, by the way.
he's just because it's his right not to
The bike lanes.
exercising his rights, Sasha.
The bike lane. I mean, they're optional. I don't have to use a bike lane. You're like, I thought that was the whole
Oh my gosh.
the bike lane. Uh,
All right. Well, that leads us right into my favorite part of my favorite part, perhaps yours, of our podcast, which is the lightning round, because I've taken up way too much of your valuable time. I know you are an attorney, and ladies and gentlemen, this is a very expensive podcast. This is the most expensive podcast we've had yet, ladies and gentlemen. So listen to it twice if you can. So,
right.
Sasha, this is where I just ask you a series of 6 questions. I'm not going to, well, I'm going to try not to comment or expound or add anything to it. I'm just going to ask and be quiet. You say as much or as little as you'd like, and when we hit 6, we'll wrap.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite business book?
Okay, I have to put 2 of them because you need both. I like the E-Myth by, I think it's Michael E. Gerber, and Deep Work by Cal Newport.
Great books. Love those. What's the best advice you have ever received?
Not everything is a dumpster fire.
Not everything is a dumpster fire. Love it. Question number 3. What one habit or stack of habits do you employ to set yourself up for success?
Making time every day to keep up with the news, so keeping myself educated and informed. Spacing out emails, so I check them in the morning and check them in the afternoon so that my whole day is not just responding to emails. And also just being disciplined about shutting things off. Like when you're done, you're done.
Favorite Los Angeles landmark?
I would have to say it's landmarks and it's the case study houses. I'm very into architecture. And so all of the case study houses, we have quite a few here in LA. I recently went to the Hollyhock house. I recommend to everybody. That house is so nice.
The Hollyhock House?
Yeah, it was Frank Lloyd Wright. I cannot think of the woman's name. And it was based off of the hollyhock flower. And so you see, like, he made things very geometric. So you see the pattern of the hollyhock in like the windows and the furniture and like the house. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright had a very different style of building house. But when you walk into it, I still feel like today, I'm like, I could live in this. Like I want, like, if this was built new, I would buy it.
Never heard of that. I'll check that out.
It's in Hollywood.
Podcast, music, or audiobook while commuting?
I mostly commute in silence. If not, it's probably music.
And last question. If you could have dinner with any person, living or dead, fake or non-fictional,
Mm-hmm.
who would it be and why?
I think presently I would say Ali Abdal. He's a YouTuber based out of, I think, London. He's in England for sure. And he was a doctor in the UK, and he's like a productivity like specialist or guru, so to speak. But I feel like when you watch his YouTube videos, you're like, I could sit down and like talk to him and pick his brain. Like I feel like I wouldn't feel so intimidated by him, but I could also recognize that he probably has a lot of like valuable insight on just business in general.
And we'll go one more on this one. What question would you ask him? What would be the one question? You can ask him just one question.
How did you know that your key man was your key man? Because he has like a key man who I believe kind of reached out to him. But I want to know, like, how did you know that like this was your key man? And I guess the follow would be like, how do you balance not being over reliant on your key man, but also keeping your key man invested? Because like a lot of businesses, it's like the key man keeps it going. Like how do you balance that?
Very fantastic question. If you ever figure out the answer, if you ever do ask him that or figure out the answer,
If
that I'd be
Alfion Doll
interested in
ever
knowing.
sees this and we have a phone call, that's what I want to know, bud.
We're getting on a 3-way podcast here.
Check him. I like his channel. I think he's got like several million subscribers now.
Wow.
He has like I like just all in all, I've seen so many videos of him, and he just is like, you could tell he's a humble guy. and he's like very appreciative of what he's got going on, but that he like you can still tell like he hasn't atrophied. Like there he's like still thinking like how do I keep going? As much as he's successful, he still has that like how do we keep going with this without being like, money is the end all be all.
Right, right. Money is important, but not the most important thing kind of guy, right?
Yeah.
Which I believe personally, if as I try to teach my daughters, it's not money is important because some people try to say money's not important. I don't care about money, money, blah blah blah. And to which I say, if I went around telling every one of my friends, anyone who would listen, all of the YouTubers out there, that I don't care about my wife. My wife's not that big a deal. I don't, she's not that important. How long do you suppose I would have my wife for?
Oh yeah.
Not very long.
No.
Same deal with money. Same deal with money.
Well, money is more or less like the vehicle. And you're like not going to be able to get anywhere without money, but once you get somewhere, it's more about the experience than the money, so to speak. So it's like it's a vehicle, or really it's a tool. Like I remember in econ class, my teacher in college, I think it was econ too. I think it was I don't know if it was, I think it was macroeconomics. And he goes, money has no value. He goes, it just holds value. The TV that you buy with it, the house that you buy with it, the wedding ring that you get with it, that's value. But it's just a placeholder for value. And so if you have goals and dreams, money will definitely help you get there. But it's the goals and dreams that you focus on. Money, to me, money will always come. There's like, I'm in America, there will be always ways to make money. It's possible. But it's more so finding like kind of just your North Star, but like, what is it that you want to do? And the money will facilitate and the money will come.
If you love what you do and you're successful at it, money follows. It's like a KPI for success. It's not the goal. It's what comes if you're doing right by people. You're adding value to the world in a positive way. It's a KPI for success. That's how I see it. One of my mentors taught me that. They're like, think of it as a scorecard.
Yeah.
If you're helping people and doing right by the world and right by law, right by God, then money will come, no problem.
Yeah.
And find something you love and do it that way. And I'm like, all
right. The universe always balances itself out. If you're like doing good,
why
would you not get good back?
And it's never not happened that way. Yeah. Inverse is also true.
Yeah.
Well, Sasha, that brings us to the end of our very enjoyable session. Is there any parting words you'd love for our adoring audience of like 20?
Any like concluding thoughts for them that we were asking?
Any parting shots? Yeah, any parting last words? Not last words completely, but.
You have to be the change that you want to see. If something's important enough to you, it's like, in the case of landlords, if it's important enough to you, you'll show up for it. So if you don't like the way things are going, you'll show up to a city council meeting and say it, or you'll vote accordingly, or you'll, talk to people about it. And to some degree, you should always stand up for what you believe in, but you should always be open to hearing other people. And life is all about basically the middle ground, and the middle ground will always be shifting, but nothing is ever the same always. Things are always changing. So change is not scary. It's only scary if you're not putting an input onto the change. So for landlords, change is going to happen one way or another, but it would best serve you to weigh in on it and to, make your thoughts heard, even if you risk people disagreeing with you. Which is okay.
It's America. We argue as long as it's done in a civil manner.
Always disagree with you. If you've been married, if you had friends, if you had parents, like you had a boss, someone will always disagree with you, and that's okay too.
Right. Because if everyone just said yes, it'd be a monarchy or communism or something like that. If we're all just yes people, but again, back to our Americans. Americans were the badasses. We didn't like to say yes, and just acquiesced for no reason. We wanted to know why and how and for what reason they're doing such things, or why we're paying taxes for, et cetera, et cetera. We
Well,
didn't
yeah,
just
but
roll over.
why do I work for someone else when I can like really work for myself? And working in the sense that, if I have a job or if I have a business, that's mine. It's my paycheck. That's, my earnings at the end of the year. It's my income. And again, there's not everybody has to do the same. Not everyone has to want to be an entrepreneur. It's okay if you don't. It is stressful. It is
100%.
hard.
Yes,
But
it is.
the main thing is, put yourself in the other person's shoes. And I do that a lot. Like, how do you have to pontificate what it's going to be like on the other side? What is it going to be like if this change happens? But if you don't say anything, then you're putting in, a nail in your own coffin, so to speak. And I think landlords they're not really by nature adversarial because they're mom and pops. I mean, they don't want to
Right.
risk offense. And you have to kind of risk offense because the rights that we have today for tenants is because they risked offense and they risked offense very loudly. And so, yeah, it's maybe a little out of control. Yeah, I think we need to bring it back to the center again, but you can't do that if you don't talk about it. And as
Right.
many tenants that are on one side saying that they need this, you need as many, if not more, landlords on the other side saying, no, it's not going to work, and here's why. And you can't rely that someone else is going to do it. Oh, someone else will say it. Someone else will figure it out. That doesn't make it sense. It's like, well, it doesn't make sense right now because someone else obviously didn't figure it out strong enough or loud enough.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Sasha. Fabulous having you on our show, and we'll be in touch probably sooner than later. I'll see you at maybe the next city council meeting.
Yes, I've got
and
to keep track of those.
yeah, good luck on those. And that's all for today, folks. Thank you for listening, and